right, for our second one, we are going to do this beach shaker card, and I've even got some shells in there, super appropriate for the beach. So we're going to use these two stamp sets here, this one for the water and the writing in the sand, and then this one here for the clouds and the chair. So we'll do the water first. Move that to the side. So I've already got my paper sitting in my stamp positioner, and a stamp positioner is really, really helpful when you're using these color layer stamps. If you happen to want to do a second stamping in exactly the same spot, this is the answer for you. So first one here is this guy. I'm going to do it just a little bit less than half the way up. This stamp isn't going to go all the way to the edges, but we're going to have our foam tape and our frame around there anyway, so that's not going to make any difference. Stick it up there. Now I've got my paper in the corner, so if it happens to shift, I can easily move it. Now, especially when these stamps don't have any ink on them, they like to stick to the paper. So you want to make sure that wherever you position your paper, if it happens to lift up, it's going to be very easy to move back down if you need to. Because sometimes even just lifting it up, sometimes it moves. Normally I'd put more magnets on, but with clear stamps and this positioner, these magnets are just slightly a little bit thick. So sometimes it's hard to get a nice pressing on your stamp when the magnets are too thick. Now I'm not looking for a clear image here, I'm looking for just a layer of color, but the ink does tend to even out as it dries. But if you wanted it a little bit more even, you could stamp it a third time. I'm just doing it twice here. The next one is the next darkest color. So that first color I used was Broken China. This one is Salty Ocean. Perfect color for a beach image. There we go. I'll stamp a second time. There we go. I'm going to clean these stamps off once I've got all of my stamping done. Do it all at once. The last image here. Now these are pretty easy to line up just because they have the horizon line, the straight line there. So I just line it up with that. Next color I'm doing is Uncharted Mariner. I love this color. Such a pretty one. There we go. I don't think that needs a second stamping. All right, now I'm going to put Hello in the sand. Now, obviously this sand here right now is light blue because of the paper that I've used, but I am going to ink it and turn it brown. I have something here that keeps getting, it keeps my stamp positioner keeps hitting, so I'm just moving that. There we go. Now you could have easily used white cardstock for the background and then inked the sky if you wanted to, but I decided I just wanted to go for a light blue background behind everything. Now whenever I make a mask for my stamps, and this is one that I've made for this particular one, I just keep it with my stamp set to be reused again and again. This particular mask, the way I made it, it's just on a post-it note, and I just stamped my silhouette, my biggest image here, this one, and then I just cut along the edges. And that's just to be able to block this off so that when I ink my sand, I'm not going to get brown all over the blue there. Where did my brush go? I know I pulled it up. There it is, right there. Now, I'm not worried about it staying pristine and staying in exactly the same space, so I'm just holding it down. There is a little bit of adhesive on the back of this Post-it note just because it is a Post-it note, but I have used it quite a bit, so it is wanting to pull up. And I'm not too worried about getting this pristinely colored either. Like, I don't need full tan coverage. I just want to make sure that it looks more brown than blue. There we go. Tuck that to the side. Now back in the positioner, I'm going to stamp the clouds. So the first thing I'm going to do with the clouds is I'm going to stamp them white. I'm going to do the base of them white for all of them, and then I'm going to stamp a gray over top for the shadow. And I want to have some of it coming off of the page. I don't want them all within the center. It just looks a little bit better if you have some of your image moving off of there. This one I'm not going to, just because, I mean, it's going to go off of my frame, but I don't want it off of my paper just because then I have to shift it over. Which, if you want to shift it over, you can. But just keep in mind where you shifted it to, so that if you happen to have to do a second stamping, you know exactly where that line is. Now I'm just going to clean this a second. I have a little bit of the Uncharted Mariner on here, and just at the off chance that I press a little bit hard with my white, I don't want to get blue on my white pad here. There we go. Now this is a white pigment pad, so I'm going to need to heat set it in order to get that to dry to do the gray over top of it. Perfect. I'm going to clean these off with my baby wipe just because I have it out now. Now, if you didn't want to heat set it, you could just let it sit and dry, but it's just going to take a little while. I just don't want to wait, so I'm going to speed up the process by taking out my heat tool and drying it that way. I'm also going to do the water because I want to take an embossing pen and I want to get some white embossing on there for the waves. The Distress ink has resin in it, and if I don't heat set it, that embossing powder is just going to stick to the whole thing. So I'm going to heat that as well. So you'll notice I was doing it from the top and from the bottom. Paper tends to start to curl with the heat tool, and in order to combat that, I'm just heating it from the top and the bottom. It doesn't curl a lot, but just a little bit. You can see that it's kind of curled a little bit here. So by doing some from the top and some from the bottom, that just helps control how much it's going to curl. All right. Now that white is fairly light, so it is a little bit harder to match these. There we go. Make sure that's in the corner. If you wanted your clouds a little bit darker, you could stamp them a second time to get a darker white. But I don't want them too noticeable. There we go. And I've got this one way up, but that's okay.